Welcome to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Making headlines this Tuesday, March 12th. The US tells China to stop hacking attacks. Hidden North Korean slush funds found in China. And is the China-Africa honeymoon over? The White House National Security Advisor Tom Donilon has urged China to end its cyber espionage activities against American companies. He spoke at the Asia Society in New York on Monday and said attacks originating from China are stealing company secrets on a, quote, unprecedented scale. Donilon added that the international community cannot afford to tolerate such activity from any country. This is the first time the US government has made specific mention of China as being behind the mounting reports of cyber attacks. In response, spokeswoman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said today that the Chinese regime is willing to talk to the US about cybersecurity. The Obama administration recently announced a new executive order on cybersecurity. Donilon said on Monday that the US will take action to protect its economy against cyber threats. Last month, US-based internet security company Mandiant linked the Chinese military to large numbers of cyber attacks on US entities. The Chinese regime has so far denied the accusations. After weeks of negotiations between the US and China, the United Nations Security Council finally agreed on sanctions against North Korea. But the job isn't done. China is refusing to freeze slush fund accounts believed to belong to Kim Jong-un as part of the financial sanctions against its communist ally.
The US and South Korea have uncovered a dozen bank accounts in China believed to belong to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The bank accounts reportedly contain hundreds of millions of dollars worth of slush funds. Several were found in Shanghai, as well as other cities throughout China. The problem is, they aren't part of the new sanctions. Last Thursday, the UN Security Council voted to further cut off the flow of cash to North Korea for staging its third nuclear test in February. Despite urging from South Korea and the United States, the Chinese regime is unwilling to include these slush funds in the new sanctions. A source in the South Korean government told a local newspaper that China is, quote, reluctant to touch North Korea's real Achilles heel. According to the source, freezing these slush funds would effectively block further attempts at nuclearization and hurt North Korea. At a press conference earlier today, Chinese representatives called for a resolution through dialogue. China's foreign ministry spokesperson said that sanctions are not the solution and that six-party talks should be renewed.
China's growing interest in Africa, especially in its natural resources, has been well documented with growing investments in the continent. But whether this is a benefit or a curse for Africa is becoming a hotly contested issue. As one economist says, it's complicated.
The governor of Nigeria's central bank, Lamido Sanusi, has warned that Africa must, quote, remove the rose-tinted glasses through which it views China. In this Financial Times article, Sanusi says the relationship is no longer that of two peers in the developing world. Instead, it is one of an imperialist power exploiting a weaker economy. Sanusi then criticized the Chinese regime for hampering Africa's industrialization and development. Mike Morris is the Director of Policy Research in International Services and Manufacturing at Cape Town University. He says African nations need to have a united approach towards China to balance the relationship.
China has a policy and a strategy for Africa. Africa as a whole doesn't have one for China. In other words, what that means is that China can deal with 52 countries with the same policy and strategy. The African countries are all trying to cut a bilateral deal amongst them, between themselves, and cut the next country out, and not able to stand together in one forum as one voice, and that would be to the best of their advantage.
Sanusi warns against Africa seeing China as its savior or the source of its own problems. Like other major economies, he says, China is there for its own gain. China's taking of raw materials from Africa and sending back Chinese manufactured goods has created problems. While China has helped to build African infrastructure, Sanusi says it's not developing Africa's human capital. Most observers agree that China's interest in Africa lies in its natural resources. African conservation expert Philip Maruthi welcomes China's presence, but wants its development there to be sustainable.
Contribute to conservation in Africa, and we will become very happy about the integration of Chinese. We appreciate that China has a very great role to do in Africa in development. That is appreciated, but we would like respect for those resources.
Snubbed also does not advocate severing the relationship entirely. He wants African countries to engage China for mutual benefit that helps the local economy and the development of human resources.
Ongoing disputes between China and Japan are getting acted out even in some rather inappropriate settings. Japan just held memorial services for the 2-year anniversary of the devastating March 11 earthquake and tsunami that claimed over 18,000 lives. But the Chinese regime used it as an opportunity to slam Japan over the inclusion of a rival in the ceremony.
China is balking at the inclusion of Taiwan at Japan's memorial service for the 2-year anniversary of the March 11 tsunami. To show just how dissatisfied the Chinese regime was, it withheld its ambassador from attending the event. The communist regime considers Taiwan a part of its territory and demands that other countries do the same. And according to a treaty with Beijing in 1972, Japan would do likewise. But Taiwan's donation to the relief effort was higher than 127 countries combined, totaling almost $200 million. Excluding them from the memorial didn't seem prudent. In fact, that's what happened last year. The Japanese government was dominated by the Democratic Party of Japan. It had favored closer ties to Beijing. So, despite the outflow of donations from Taiwan, at the first-year anniversary memorial, it was kept off a list of countries present. The Taiwanese representative was put in the general seating area with private sector representatives. This caused uproar in Japan, and then Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda was later forced to apologize to Taiwan. At this year's memorial, now under the Liberal Democratic Party, the Taiwanese representative was placed in the same area as diplomatic envoys. 18,000 people were left dead or missing after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami ravaged Japan.
And still ahead on NTD China News, the real reason behind the delay of Bo Xilai's trial. More than a dozen miners trapped in a mud and rock slide, and Shen has left London but not before leaving some long-lasting impressions. And welcome back. It's been about a year since disgraced former Chongqing leader Bo Xilai has been in the public eye. As the new generation of Chinese leaders consolidate their power during the National People's Congress, we look at why it's taking the Chinese regime so long to put Bo Xilai on trial.
A year ago, ousted Chinese official Bo Xilai was still flying high at the last National People's Congress. Now, stripped of his official roles, his wife in jail for murder, and facing serious allegations himself, Bo's future is hanging in the balance. Observers expected him to have been tried by now, before the current political meetings to solidify the Chinese leadership transition.
Because this happened under Hu and Wen's reign, it should have been finished up before they leave. It's not very normal that the case is left for the next generation of leaders, regardless of whether it turns into political capital or baggage.
But months after his ousting, that trial date proves elusive. Peng He says that's because taking Bo Xilai down for his more serious crimes will throw the legitimacy of the Communist Party into question.
For example, the severe human rights violations Bo committed during his crime-fighting campaign in Chongqing, like using torture to extract confessions, can easily be used against him. Also, his involvement in the forced organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience can be used to bring him down too.
In particular, the forced organ harvesting claims implicate other communist elders much senior than Bo. Since 2006, overseas investigators have alleged that the Chinese regime was killing persecuted Falun Gong practitioners for their organs. The persecution was launched by former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin, a known supporter of Bo Xilai. Officially, state-run media say the allegation against Bo relate to his abuse of power and corruption. Peng He believes this is why the trial has been delayed, because Bo Xilai knows these crimes are common within the Communist Party.
It's not that they can't convict him for corruption. Rather, Bo needs to cooperate. What if he exposes in court that there are many more corrupt officials than him? The regime needs him to cooperate.
That cooperation may be lacking. In February, Reuters reported that Bo had gone on hunger strike to protest against the investigation against him. He reportedly needed hospital treatment at one point. Bo has not been seen in public since appearing at the 2012 National People's Congress. Last Wednesday, during the current NPC, Bo's replacement in Chongqing says the case against the former party chief remains under investigation.
A mud and rock slide has left 18 miners buried 1/3 of a mile underground. Rescue attempts are underway, but time is running out.
18 miners are still trapped underground at the coal mine in northeast China. State-run media reported on Tuesday that mud and rocks fell into the mine shaft where they were working. It happened in the state-run Zhengxin coal mine in Heilongjiang province. 25 miners were trapped at about 2:30 p.m. local time on Monday. 7 miners working near the shaft entrance were rescued, according to state-run media. The trapped miners were working 1/3 of a mile underground when the mud and rock slide began, blocking the shaft. Local officials said more than 200 rescuers have been mobilized.
We are trying to restore the conveyors inside the shaft so we can carry out the rescue. Our goal is to rescue the trapped miners at all costs.
CCTV reported that an investigation into the cause of the incident is underway, but no details have been released. The mine is designed to produce 600,000 tons of coal a year. Lax safety standards combined with incredibly high demand have made China's mines the deadliest in the world. Accidents cause the deaths of thousands of miners every year.
While most mainland Chinese people avoid talking about Tibet and the recent self-immolation protests, one Beijing artist is not afraid to address the issue. He said that painting portraits of the Tibetan protesters has helped him focus on the individuals behind the burnings.
A Chinese painter named Liu Yi is showing his respect for Tibetans who self-immolated by painting their portraits. 50-year-old Liu started the project last year and now has 40 small black and white oil paintings in his Beijing studio. He painted them from photographs of the self-immolators he found online and received from a Tibetan friend. Liu is also a follower of Tibetan Buddhism, and he says he wants to highlight the people behind the photos. He hopes to bring attention to the issue while the media in the mainland and many Chinese citizens remain silent.
The vast majority of Chinese intellectuals have vested interests and don't dare to speak out. I think this is a disgrace. Painting these people is my way of showing my gratitude to them. I think they're truly great.
A recent random survey by Radio Free Asia found that mainland Chinese are mostly sympathetic to the plight of Tibetans. However, they do not necessarily support the self-immolation protests against Chinese rule. Liu said he did not support the self-immolations either, but he urged the leaders of China to listen to the concerns of Tibetans to help solve the crisis.
The two sessions are taking place now, and I hope the Chinese government can really reflect on their policy towards ethnic groups. First of all, they should let more people understand it. The media should not stay silent on this as they have until now. They should allow more people to understand the truth. By doing this, they would make Chinese people more compassionate on the Tibetan issue. Everyone could be more compassionate.
Liu said he has been under pressure from authorities who told him not to give interviews and questioned him about his connections to Tibetans. Liu said he had no plans to stop painting portraits. Around 107 Tibetans have set themselves on fire thus far to protest China's policies in the region. In recent weeks, over a dozen Tibetans have been detained in connection with the self-immolations. Human rights groups have criticized Chinese authorities for criminalizing the burnings.
And we go now to London, where Shen Performing Arts played to sold-out performances at the Barbican Centre over the weekend. One audience member says the performance reached for her heart and compassion.
The tranquility of Lakeside Terrace welcomed spectators to Shen Yun's penultimate show at London's Barbican Centre on Saturday afternoon. The audience was moved to tears, and one member explained how she was wrapped up in emotion too.
I came out, I'm on a cloud. It was absolutely wonderful. The colour and a great deal of emotion. A great deal of emotion. I could feel it all around me, and I saw people crying, and I was part of it. It's a wonderful way of showing that to people, and we're all part of the human race. It's wonderful, yeah. It really touched me deeply.
She was also moved by an humanitarian aspect of the show.
It reaches into your heart and your compassion for other people who are less off, worse than you, and trying to practice their beliefs and better themselves. And they're working against the Red Devil. I mean, it's people aren't as aware of it, really, I think, the trouble that people are in. And we have such freedom here that it is very sad, and it does. You get a lot of compassion out of it. And I think the music and the dancing and the colour, it's all part of it, isn't it?
Mary was referring to the stories about Falun Gong practitioners in China under oppression for their peaceful beliefs. She also gave us her overall feeling.
Glad to be alive and very happy that I had the opportunity to be here and see it for myself.
And that's all for this broadcast of NTD China News. For more about China-related content, visit our website at ntd.tv or subscribe to our YouTube channel, NTD on China. Coming up next is China Focus with Shelley Zhang. Stay tuned.